I welcome you both in the studio and at the receiving terminals of this transmission to this evening session. The topic of this evening session is adult education, the basic concept. As we all know, every human being passes through certain stages such as infancy, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, old age and senility. As far as education of these stages of life of a person is concerned, we have some understanding, that is child education. Child education means everybody knows about what sort of education that the children will be taking right from the beginning. So that as far as concept of child also is concerned, there is no problem. Once it comes to adult education, very concept adult makes people confused. Who is an adult? How to define an adult? What are the criteria that one should keep in mind while defining an adult? Or what are the characteristics of an adult? Who is really an adult? All these are the main problems as far as the conception of the adult is concerned. Once the concept of adult is clear, then half of the subject of adult education is understood. Like the saying we have, anything well began is half done. So like that, once the concept of adult is understood very well, then the concept of adult education can be easily understood. So in this session, we will be covering different aspects related to the basic concept of adult education, like who is an adult, what are the criteria of defining an adult, difficulties in defining adult, characteristics of an adult, how to distinguish an adult from a child or juvenile, and what are the misconceptions about adult education, and what is the actual concept of adult education, and what are the characteristics of adult education, what are the basic features, and what is all its scope. So now let us take one by one. Who is an adult? Whenever any doubt arises as far as the meaning of any word is concerned, we prefer to refer to a dictionary. Let us see here in this case what Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary has to say regarding adult. Adult is a person grown to full size or strength, is intellectually and emotionally mature. As far as legal definition of adult is concerned, as per this dictionary, adult is old enough to vote, marry, etc. As far as the maturity is concerned, what is the extent of maturity? You have maturity, I have maturity, others have their own maturity levels. So what is the exact quantum of maturity that is required for exactly calling a person as adult? Otherwise, we all simply men and women. All men and women may not be adult in the true sense of its meaning. That is the reason why we have to understand this adult in the broader concept. There are different criteria based on which an adult is defined. One is age. It can be legal age or chronological age. Everyone grows. Every moment, every minute, every second, our age is increasing. What is the point at which age we can call a person has become an adult? Similarly, maturity. What is the quantum of maturity? Whether it is a physical maturity, biological maturity, social maturity or psychological maturity. These are all the aspects of maturity. But within these aspects, what is the quantum of maturity that is required for a person to be called an adult? Similarly, experience. If you talk of experience, it is oceanic. Every moment we get an experience in different aspects of our life. Right now I am in the studio, I am having altogether different experience. You are at the receiving terminals, you have altogether different experience. Others are there in the studio who have to manage certain things, they are having their own experiences. Like that, what kind of experience we have to take into account for calling a person an adult. Similarly, another criteria is citizenship. It must give certain rights and duties. We cannot call every person an adult. Though citizenship is acquired by birth, he cannot be called an adult. So all citizens are not adults. That is one criteria. Similarly, we have talked about age, legal otherwise. Even in terms of legal age, it is not common. For example, legal age for franchise is there. Franchise means voting right. It was earlier 21 years in India, now it has been reduced to 18 years. As far as marriage is concerned, legal age for marriage is concerned, it is 21 years for males and 18 years for females. It varies again from country to country and from society to society. So what is exactly the age that can be universally applicable? Can it be possible? This is another aspect that we also have to keep in mind while defining an adult. Like that, there are so many criteria based on which adult can be defined, but not a single criteria alone by itself is not sufficient to define an adult. There are so many definitions given by Wiltshire, Cameron, Abs, Singhi, Novels, Legge, Jarvis. The list is not complete. There are so many experts in the field who have defined adult. While defining adult, they have taken different criteria into account. Then how to define adult? What are all the difficulties that we have to overcome before we can define adult? If you take any one criteria, that is not sufficient, as I told you. Theoretically it is difficult, because age, for example, if you say this legal age, it is varying. For males it is something, for females it is something. Similarly, in one country it is something, another country it is totally different. Like that, if we have to define adult by taking criteria of maturity and experience, again, what type of maturity, in which field, how many years of experience, at what level, in doing what, in listening what, like that, so many criteria are in functioning as something. Like that, it becomes very difficult to define adult theoretically. Similarly, practically also, we cannot say that this person is adult, because there are many people who are children but they behave like adults. Similarly, there are many adults who behave like children. That's why it is very difficult to draw practical boundaries as far as defining of an adult is concerned. So both in terms of theory and practice, it becomes very difficult to define the term adult. Further, there are some experts who have defined even adulthood into different stages: early adulthood, middle adulthood, late adulthood. Then what is the age that we can use for categorization of these types of adulthoods again? This is how it further complicates the definition of adulthood itself. There are some people who try to distinguish between an adult and a child, but finally got vexed up, and they say that is it first of all necessary to draw the distinction between an adult and a child? One such an expert is Legge. He says there is no need to distinguish between an adult and a child, because whatsoever the education we give, that promotes maturity and experience, based on which we can call adult. But again the same problems come up. These are maturity and experience, quantum, diversity, etc. As I was telling you, there are children who behave in extremely matured manner. Then we get surprised. Is he a child really? It appears as if he is grown up in age, though he is chronologically at tender age. So he is a child man. Though he is a child, he is like a man, matured man. Similarly, there are many men who we cannot call as adult actually. So because their behavior is like a child. So the moment sometimes we see them, we get irritated. We may not feel like talking to them, or we may not be interested to interact with them on any matter, because the level of maturity is totally different, and they are by all means like a child in their conduct. Next, what are the overall characteristics based on which we can call a man adult? Because no one criterion is sufficient. We were talking about age. What is that age? Whether it is legal or otherwise. For example, if it is legal age in a particular country and the person has crossed that particular age, we call him an adult. He is exercising his voting right. He is called as an adult as far as the voting right is concerned. Similarly, marriage age. Marriage is conducted lawfully after a particular age. So the person is eligible for marriage. So he is an adult. Next, maturity. So person may be having some 30 years, 40 years, but people may say that he is not fit for marriage, because he doesn't have the desired level of maturity. So like that, this maturity is another criterion, because this maturity must help in identifying a person, one's own strengths and weaknesses, or he should be in a position to distinguish between what is right and wrong. If the person is lacking in these things, then his maturity level is low. and his understanding must be there on various matters and on particularly rights and limitations of the person concerned and also others. Otherwise, he would be erring in so many ways. He cannot be called an adult because his understanding is low. Next is sensible. He must be sensible. Whatever he does, it must be rational and responsible. So, ability to act rationally and sensibly is another criteria which must be considered while defining an adult. Another is self-control. If a person is an adult, he must exercise self-control or restrain oneself from certain things depending upon the situations. That reflects the level of his maturity. Similarly, he must focus off self, means outside the self. He must keep aside some part of his selfish interest, if at all we have to call him an adult. So in that thing, he must be ready to sacrifice certain things. That sacrifice also can be partial or full depending upon the public cause of importance. If the cause is really great importance, the sacrifice must be to any extent. Like that, many freedom fighters were ready to sacrifice their lives. Why? Because there was a great cause involved. They wanted to free India from bondage. That is the reason why they have sacrificed their lives. They are the real adults. Similarly, the person must reflect due balance in picking and choosing actions. These actions may be involving gains and pleasures, but that should not be the criteria. If there are gains and pleasures, yes, I will be ready to accept this responsibility or to do this act. That should not be the thing. Even if there are losses, dangers or pains involved, one must come to the fore to take up the responsibility or do certain things depending upon the situations where it is actually required. So that person is adult who really does this thing. So this is another criteria. Next, person must own up the responsibility. Whatsoever one does, he must own, yes, I did this. Not that a person does something, if it is beneficial, yes, I did it. Otherwise, no, it is done by somebody else. So whatever gainful thing or pleasurable thing or loss or danger, one must own the responsibility. That is another criterion. Next, one must continue to exist as an adult. Not that today he is behaving like an adult or during this particular event the person is behaving like an adult. Sometimes we call a person, for the first time you have done excellent thing. It means his action has reflected some level of maturity which otherwise was missing in that person. So he was not adult at that particular other points of time. So not only he should act like an adult at particular moments, he must continue to behave like an adult all through his adulthood. So he is a person whom we can call an adult. And last but not least, he must act and also react with kindness, compassion and reason. That compassion, kindness and reason must be with a long term perspective, and also the goal of actions and reactions must be achievement of the self actualization. That is, one must be working towards realization of the fullest potential of the individual in whichever the activity the person involves. So these are all the broad characteristics based on which an adult should be defined, or we can confidently define adult. But is it really easy to define a person by taking all these characteristics? It may be difficult, but there is an attempt made by somebody that has been put in the internet. That site is this cyber coitus interruptus, and site is given there. You can see on the slide. So in this thing an attempt is made. A real adult, he came out with the term real adult, but first of all he must be an adult. Means whatever the criteria, whether it is age or maturity or whatsoever it is, he is an adult. But real adult is one, according to him, is that I think real adults take responsibility for and clean up their own messes. Whatever the messes they create, whether in terms of emotional things, domestic affairs, culinary, environmental thing or whatever, they must take up the responsibility for and clean up their messes, except when they are physically or mentally incapacitated. For example, a physically disabled person is there who cannot walk, he has done something which he cannot clean up, but there he is incapacitated. In such cases, we cannot say that he is not an adult. By mistake something happens. So occasional situations cannot be taken as it. But juveniles on the other hand, they look for somebody to clean up whatever they do. So that's why whatever their physical ages, they make someone else clean up after them. So that is the basic difference between an adult and a child. I think we can behave like an adult by taking all these criteria, and we should be in a position to define others also whether they are adults or not. I think now you must have got clarity about who an adult is. Then what about adult education? Adult education is all related to converting a person into an adult. Then how to become an adult is the question. If I want to become an adult by tomorrow, is it possible? No, it is not a sudden event. It is a lifelong process, and adulthood is actually cumulative result of so many factors that operate on him. It comes mostly from accumulation of age, observation, experience over lifetime of an individual, because every moment we may be getting experiences, whether they are old or new. Whatever the new, they add on, and age also brings in certain changes in the physique, mental activities and other things. All these things collectively operate on a person, converting him into an adult. So this is how adult education will play its role in converting a person into an adult. But can we define adult education, though we have understood the concept of adult? If you ask anyone in any country, everyone will have some understanding, but their understanding may be wrong, because they do not have the complete meaning of adult. That is the reason why these misconceptions also arise in their mind as far as a concept of adult education is concerned. In developed countries, most of the people think that adult education is nothing but literacy for the aged person. Aged particularly, they think that it is for the old people, old aged people. But it is not so. As I told you, childhood and adolescence and adulthood is there, thereafter old age. So the age that is falling between adolescence and old age is all called adulthood. It is actually the longest span or stage in the life of an individual. So most part of education that we receive in our life falls under adult education. Contrary to this, people have misconception about adult education, like literacy for the old age. Another misconception is they think that it is only literacy, that is teaching of reading, writing and arithmetic. Is that only adult education? That is not adult education. It includes so many other factors, so many other aspects of education. That's the reason why it is more broader. Some people, they have some better understanding, like it is more than literacy, but they think that it all falls under outside the formal system of education, like schools, colleges and universities. Or their understanding is that all adult education is offered through non-formal education system only. But still that also is a misconception, because adult education encompasses all forms of education, whether it is formal or non-formal or informal. Similarly, another misconception is it doesn't lead to any certification. People think that by studying adult education, or those people who are receiving adult education, it all does not lead to certificates, diplomas or degrees, which is a misconception. It is wrong. Another misconception is that it is education which is acquired by spending leisure time, particularly for acquiring those things which have been missed during certain part of life. Is that adult education? No, it is much more than this thing. It includes all education acquired during leisure time plus remedial education. So the basic concept of adult education is much more. If we overcome these misconceptions, then the concept would be clear. So like people thought that it is only literacy. No, that is wrong. It is more than literacy for the adults, not for the children. So it may or may not lead to certificates, diplomas or degrees. So one should not have that feeling that only education which leads to certificates, diplomas or degrees is formal education, otherwise it is adult education. It also ranges, as I was telling, from leisure time spent to achieving or acquiring formal certificates, diplomas or university degrees, whether from conventional universities or non-formal universities or institutions like distance education institutions, open universities, correspondence institutes, etc. Another thing is, this encompasses all forms of education, formal, informal, non-formal education, and also it caters to diverse categories of people, whether it is before the job or when people are on the job or after completing their job. It means outside their office hours. Then whether the people are having job or not having job, everything can be covered under adult education. It is closely related to many things. It may be related to physical environment or physique itself of the adult, social, political, economic, geographical, cultural and other conditions of adults and the society or the country. And the education that is offered encompasses all content levels, methods and modes of education. Then how to define adult education? Many people have made an attempt, and some people started defining it as an education that starts at a particular stage or level of education. It is true in one sense, because by the time a person becomes adult, he or she must have already received some part of education. So it actually starts at a particular stage of education. But there may be people who have missed it. In that case, it is for remedial education of those people. That's why it is starting at that level, means literacy level. Theirs is illiteracy. Education. I cannot call no education, because people get education through informal means also. Similarly, some people call it as a process. One is Liverwright and Haygood. They have collectively called it as a process. A process means there are sequence of educational activities involved, and that sequence will be providing certain opportunities to the learners, the adults who will be acquiring so many things. Some people call it as an activity or action or a program launched by some state or some individuals. It is also correct. One is Paulo Freire. He is a known personality in the field of adult education, and his concept is action for liberation, because the man's education must enable him to free himself from certain bonded life. Otherwise, that education doesn't have any meaning. So Paulo Freire is one such a person who has defined it as an action. Next attempt made is by Farre et al., Farre and others in their report, that is, it is a culmination of educational process. That is, it is the education which is received towards the later age of an individual. That's why it is called culmination or terminal education. Which is received, means once a person has received complete education, then that is the end of it. That's what the concept of Farre et al. Have defined. Like we have defined adult, is there acceptable definition? Because every definition can be contested and many people would not agree. Like that, the adult educationists all over the world also were agreeing with certain definitions and not agreeing with certain definitions, and they have finally come out with one acceptable definition in 1976 UNESCO's international conference. So, according to UNESCO, definition of adult education is entire body of organized educational processes, whatever content, level and method, whether formal or otherwise, whether they prolong or replace initial education in schools, colleges and universities, as well as in apprenticeship, whereby persons regarded as adults by the society to which they belong develop their abilities, enrich their knowledge, improve their attitudes or behavior in the twofold perspective of full personal development and participation in balanced and independent social, economic and cultural development. This is the broad definition which has been accepted by many adult education experts, though personal differences do exist as far as the definition is concerned, because one cannot do away with all these differences. Next, what is the scope of adult education? If you thoroughly analyze the UNESCO's definition given, which I have just now read out, it includes all organized educational processes. Activities must be organized, not that they just happen somewhere in some form and that we call it as adult education. Of course, we can bring it under informal education, which can form part of either adult education or child education or any education. But as far as adult is concerned, it must be organized educational processes, because adult has certain level of maturity, certain age, The main criteria are maturity and experience. So, in view of their maturity and experience, educational efforts must be organized, and it includes all type of education, be formal, informal or non-formal. So, it encompasses, from the analysis of the definition we can see that it includes all content. It can be health, it can be agriculture, it can be society, it can be economy, it can be polity, it can be something else, whichever has relevance to the adults and their life or the community, it all form part of it. And methods, whatever the methods that are used to impart education to adults, it will include under that. Similarly, modes, whether it is face to face mode or through distance mode or through online mode or through website mode, whatever we may call, it all falls under adult education. For that matter, even distance education, which we are now receiving through Open University, is a part of adult education, because all the students of Open Universities or any higher learning institutions offering education through distance mode have their students who are adults. So, this is actually higher level of adult education offered through high technology that is used by these institutions. But this education can prolong or replace. Prolong in the sense, people who have completed certain level of education but unable to continue their education in the formal system, they come and join this adult education institutions. Take for example IGNOU itself. So, it prolongs because they can continue further. Similarly, it replaces. For example, somebody has missed it, somebody wanted to do B.Ed, they could not do it, they joined some profession, and now they are in need of B.Ed. They can do it because it is replacing their missed opportunities in their life. So, it prolongs or replaces initial education which they have received in schools or colleges or universities, and there are different forms or names by which it is called. Maybe fundamental education if it is basic education for the adults. Recurrent education, it is actually coined in Europe for the people who wanted to replace or have their education interspersed with their work experience. They take some leave when they are on the job, then they acquire some new skills and they use those skills for better performance of their duties in the job. So, that is a recurrent. So, frequently this education and work gets mutually interspersed. That is how it is called recurrent education. Further education, it means whatever the person has received, this education, adult education, furthers it. It provides a scope for receiving more education. Similarly, another term is continuing education, correspondence education, distance education, open learning, open education, etc. These are all different terms under which adult education is being offered. Then what all adult education does? It develops basically the abilities, knowledge, attitudes, skills and behaviors, and all these aim at the twofold development of the individual, that is full personal development and his participation in developmental welfare processes undertaken by the society or the state or some other agency. This is the broad scope of adult education. Now, what is the nature and what are the characteristics of adult education? Main thing is it is purposive. Without purpose, adult education has no place. It must have some relevance to the community, it must have relevance to the culture of that community or the society or the country, based on which it is conceived and offered. So, it serves a purpose. So, it is a purposive education. This is the nature, because one must have clarity how what kind of picture one develops about adult education is. This is the picture. So, it is a purposive education. Next is participatory and problem solving. It enables the adults to participate himself, not that some education is being given to the child and he doesn't use it in his life, but it must help to solve his problems whichever he is facing, because he knows how to solve the problems, and adult must be involved in the education process through which he can solve his problem. then it is learner centered, systematic, flexible and relevant. Unlike child education, which is often delivered by the teacher in the class, whether the child is interested or not, he has to listen. That is because he is bound by certain rigidities, certain norms, etc. Whereas in the case of adult education, it is learner centered. For example, learner is not interested to listen because it is useless for him. So in such cases, he has the freedom to not to listen. That is the reason why it is learner centered. It must be systematic. It's not that a person will come and attend it at any place whichever is being offered. It must be systematically organized, and it must be flexible. Not that you have to come to this particular place, then only you will be able to get it. Okay, if he cannot come to particular place, let us provide it at some other place. Or if he doesn't want to come to any place and he wants to read it at home, yes, we must be in a position to deliver it at his home. And it must have some relevance. Why after all we should deliver it? Because if it is not related to the person, it cannot be received properly. That is the reason why education must be relevant to him. Next is it must be need based. What needs the person is having, that is the reason why education must fulfill the needs of the persons, particularly the adults, and adult education has that ability to meet the needs. Then action oriented. Once the adult perceives that it can fulfill his or her needs, then they will naturally resort to some action through which they can address their needs and problems. That is the reason why this adult education is more learner centered one. Then it is dynamic because needs are changing, problems change, because problems won't remain static. One problem we solve, another problem arises before solving the problem, or in solving one problem one may enter into some other problem, but every problem has a solution, whether created by himself or by others. If we have created, we have the solution. If adult has created, he himself can find a solution. If others have created, they have the solution. So like that the needs and problems will be changing. So the education also will be changing. In that sense, it is dynamic, it will be changing. So it like that, it is a change oriented process of learning that is offered to the adults, and in the process of change we reach to a level which brings in a kind of transformation. This transformation may be societal transformation, economic transformation, or political transformation. Whichever the transformation it is a transformative education. That's why we must have the clarity about it. Awareness building. Without awareness, a person cannot resort to action. So it must help in generating awareness related to every aspect of the adult, his life, in the family, in the environment, in the society, in the entire nation, at different levels and different stages. So his awareness should help in every moment, and he must be conscientized. So then only he will give greater importance to education, because through conscientization the level of his thinking is raised, and he will be perceiving the problem in right perspective, and he will be in a position to find right solutions. So next is experiential and network building activity. Adult is one, as we were talking, a person with a lot of experience. So all education we offer under adult education must enrich his experience, otherwise the person would simply reject it, because it has nothing to do with his life. That is the reason why one must build upon the experiences that the adult has, and in that process he must be enabled to enhance his network. Then only he will be in a position to address the issues in effective manner. Next is, it is a goal directed education, education for empowerment, because the goal is one must acquire power through education. So if we offer right education to the adults, they will get really empowered by the education that they receive. welfare, and that's why many people in the society regard educated people, because they have respect for their education, because they feel by the virtue of their education they have more power. That is the reason why they go and appreciate whatever they do. That is how other adults also can be empowered through right education. So the adult education is an education for empowerment, welfare and development oriented education. Now, in the case of child's education, it has nothing to do with development, because his major responsibility is to receive education to enable himself to read, write, understand, and improve his skills to expand the horizons of his own knowledge. But as far as adult is concerned, his education must help in his personal development, in development of the family members, individually or entire family, and also other families. That is how it is development oriented education and also welfare oriented education. What all happens once there is development and welfare? We know that quality of life will be raised, or their standard of living or plane of their present living will go up because of the development that happens through this education. We have seen what are the characteristics of an adult. Now, what are the characteristics of adult education? What is its nature? With adult education has its objectives, like education has, but major objectives are imparting of literacy of diverse types. As we were talking, literacy alone is not adult education, because that was a misconception. Okay, literacy is reading, writing, and arithmetic. When a person is unable to read, write, and do arithmetic operations, yes, for him literacy is an important thing. But after becoming a literate, what? Is it the end of adult education? No. That is the reason why adult education is broader in scope, and it includes basic literacy, scientific literacy, means about science, economic literacy, you must know something about economy or economics. Similarly, technological literacy, because right now I am able to operate computer sitting before the studio. What all happens when I am talking, when I am doing something, I know this is called technological literacy, and I have some minimum understanding. This is called technological literacy. Similarly, visual literacy. On the roads, when for example red light is there, at the stop we stop. If green light is there, then we may walk. Similarly, for vehicles also. So this is visual literacy. This is called visual literacy. So we must understand the difference between basic literacy, visual literacy. Similarly, information literacy. Everybody, every person would like to read, who is able to read, particularly the newspapers, because it provides information. So that is the ability to read and acquire information falls under information literacy. Similarly, multicultural literacy. For example, a person who is living in a village is brought to a city where there is a merger of diverse cultures, he may feel perplexed. So it requires on his part multicultural literacy is required for his adjustment in that society. Similarly, global literacy, one must have understanding of different countries, different cultures, so that the person would be in a position to interact and have regard for each other's culture and race, etc. Legal literacy. See, many people do not know many things are regarding law. So if the moment you come to know about one particular law, you will realize that there is a lot to learn. So whatever the fundamental things that are required as far as the law is concerned, once the person knows, then that is called legal literacy. Basic thing is constitution. Main, what are the basic components of constitution? What are other things involved when we are doing certain things at home, on the road, in office? These fundamental things one must know. This is called legal literacy. Similarly, computer literacy, which I was talking earlier. Next is generating awareness. That is diverse types of literacy. Generating awareness is another aspect, and this we have already discussed, and this awareness encompasses or covers wide areas like development of the self of an individual, development of the community, society, and the nation, and also understanding the mutual roles and responsibilities, or their roles and responsibilities with regard to each others. Similarly, society, economy, polity, culture, development, health, hygiene, etc. also fall under this awareness. One must know about aspects of peace and harmony, how it is important for growth, development, and welfare of the nation and the world. Next is promoting functionality. After having diverse literacies, vast knowledge that has generated awareness, one must be in a position to use it for betterment of the individual, for the betterment of the community, for solving social, economic, political problems, and also for bringing in overall change in the quality of life. So finally the goals, these goals are highest level of things which one has to achieve. This will help in raising the quality of life of individuals, families, communities, societies, and the nations, and also enable self-realization. One should be in a position to work to the fullest potential. That is the thing. Third goal is promoting peace and communal harmony. This peace and communal harmony must help in multicultural, global societal development and welfare as a whole. Thank you very much for your patience to hear this evening lecture. Thank you one and all.